Let's help Joe Rogan understand his dream. This is so funny. It's so funny that this popped up. This was with Eric Weinstein. That was, what's today, Monday? I think that was his Friday, maybe Friday or Saturday podcast that he released. And it caught my attention because of this verse in Joel 2:28. I will pour out my spirit on all humanity. It's over here, oddly. And your sons and daughters will prophesy, and your old men will dream dreams, and your young men will see visions. Your old men will dream dreams, your young men will see. Not calling Joe an old man, but no offense there, Joe. He is he's older than some of us. Let's just say that he's older than some of us, and so probably counts. He probably fits into this category of old men having dreams in these latter days, as it were. Of course, obviously, everybody sort of dreams, but we'll see if this is one of those things that that sort of, I don't know, becomes a cultural phenomenon. We'll have a bunch of old guys being like, man, I had this crazy dream. And then we have these young men seeing visions. Now, is there maybe there's sort of like, I've been following the Charlie Kirk thing, and there is something to that. These young men with visions, these young men with, I guess, a way to see the world, vision for a great organization, at least from him. Okay, so Joe Rogan's dream. My tea is exceptionally hot, so I'll probably get all hot and bothered while we do this. I have some thoughts here at the beginning, but it gets really interesting. It's only a 2.5 minute clip. Hopefully, I don't get a strike for this. I have done some edits, so I have made changes, artistic changes to stay within fair use, but I still may interrupt it just because that's the nature of how we do things these days.
I had the most bizarre dream I've ever had in my life last night. The most realistic and most bizarre dream. And it's so hard to try to explain how strange this was. But I was in some weird corridor.
Okay, remember weird corridor. He'll talk about this later as being almost like made of water or halls of water or something.
That looked like a building but was odd. Very strange. And I was encountering these beings that looked like people but very different. They were very thin. They were slightly on the tall side. And they had big heads, like larger than normal, with larger than normal eyes. But they looked like people, and they were playful, and they were scaring me. They scared me, and then they joked around, like we were just joking around. It was the most realistic dream I've ever had in my life.
So when I first heard this, and you can tell me what you think, when I first heard this, I thought, oh, he's talking about like grays. He's talking about like aliens, these sort of gray human-like figures, tall, kind of big heads, big eyes. But it does say that they're people. So I aliens, demons, angels, demons. What could they possibly be? Joe has a theory that they're evolved humans, but we'll get to that point. But so there we are. We're in a strange corridor. Human beings. Now he does this playful thing. If you have followed Joe Rogan's podcast, you will probably have heard him talk about his experience with DMT. I think it was DMT. It could have been psilocybin, and the sort of like the elves, the machine elves that some people experience. He clarifies this later. He says, no, it wasn't like that. But they had the same kind of playful mode. And so maybe that's why Brett makes that association, because Joe has told a very similar story about a hallucinogenic experience that he had where, these elves are like joking with him to get him to realize he's taking himself too seriously. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if there's a subconscious connection there. But yeah, it did sound like a similar story that Joe has told, though not a dream, but a hallucinogenic experience.
And I woke up and I could not go back. I had to stay up. I got up at 3:30 in the morning and I just went to the gym and I worked out for a couple hours. And I was like, what the was that? But it was it was very bizarre in that there was communication going on. It was like, God, I want to read into this because I know it's just a dream, but it was like, get comfortable with this.
You should read into it because it's a dream.
These things felt very organic. Whatever this was, it felt like living organic beings that were like us. There was also a water element.
Okay, we'll get to the water element here in a second. Get comfortable with this, and then Brett says you should read into it because it is a dream. Which, hey, we're helping out Joe Rogan here. We're experimenting with dream interpretation. I don't claim to be a dream interpreter, but that is a theme throughout the Bible and biblical theology and Christian theology. You can go back to Joseph. You can go back to some of these things, and so I feel like I'm well within sort of orthodox spheres of theology here. And so, yeah, obviously take everything with a grain of salt. I'm no Joseph. Get comfortable with this. Get comfortable with this. Get comfortable with this idea that beings are getting in your face. Beings are emerging from the water. Did you notice that? Not from the water. I mean, they're like in the water. Now, I may have to, I don't have my Bible app pulled up. Let me just go ahead and take a second.
Whatever this was, it felt like living organic beings that were like us. There was also a water element. It was hard to understand what the water element of it was, but there was some sort of an indication that there was water and that there was a protection from you going out into the water. But if you did go into the water, there's a bunch of predators in the water. But it wasn't.
Beings in the water, there's a protection. So there's beings that are being housed in an abyss, and there's some sort of protection going on. Hold on, though, because I missed a point that's actually kind of crucial. Gosh, I'm sorry. I'm going to go back, though.
There was a protection from you going out into the water, but if you did go into the water, there's a bunch of predators in the water. But it wasn't like sharks. It was reptile, like crocodile type things that were in the water, and that they had been like feeding them and keeping them calm and like keeping them away. But whatever these beings were in my dream, they were like what humans could eventually be. That's what it felt like. It didn't feel like a person, but I don't feel like a monkey. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it was like that. It was very, very realistic. Like there was communication going on, and I was really freaked out, and they were fucking with me to lighten me up because I was freaked out. They're like, and then they're like this, like calm down, like relax. It was so realistic. It was so realistic that when it was over, I wasn't sure what happened. Like it wasn't like, whoa, what a fucked up dream. It was like that was different. That was a different one.
That was a different one. Okay, water, reptiles, being fed, being housed, being put in bondage, held in bondage. And that's where I start thinking, hey, I've heard about this. I have heard about this. Then I saw an angel coming down from heaven, holding the keys to the abyss and a great chain in his hand. This is Revelation 20. And he laid hold of the dragon, the reptile, what did he call them? I think he called them alligators. The alligator, the reptile. I'm getting distracted again. Sorry. Forgive me. The dragon, the serpent of old, who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years, and he threw him into the abyss and shut it and sealed it over him, so that he would not deceive the nations any longer until the 1,000 years were completed. After these things, he must be released for a short time. But don't worry, Jesus has overcome the world, all of this, right? So there is a scene in the book of Revelation that doesn't exactly coincide with Joe Rogan's dream, but kind of coincides with Joe Rogan's dream, where he's in water, he's in a water world, he's in a water place, he's encapsulated in water, in the abyss, and there are essentially dragons. I don't know if Joe Rogan has ever read Revelation chapter 20, but there it is. That was sort of that piqued my interest. And then the idea that these sort of beings were kind of transhuman-like. They were like us, is what Joe said, sort of alien-like. And then Joe says they were like what we could become. So that's the transhumanist element there. Wherever these beings are in my dream, they were like what humans could eventually be. They didn't feel like they didn't feel like person, but I don't feel like a monkey. It was like that, is what he says. So I said that Joe's dream is mutilated by his evolutionary assumption. He's talking to Brett Weinstein, who's an evolutionary biologist, and these assumptions condition our modern thinkers toward an ancient deception, which is you will become like God. The deception is not that humans aren't like God. In fact, humans are made in the image of God. But the idea of becoming like God, the idea of evolving or progressing, or you need to do something so that you can become more like God. That's the deception. Adam and Eve should have just said, hey, Satan, we already are like God. We're made in God's image. Buzz off. But they didn't. They go, oh, well, we need to add wisdom. We need to add wisdom from that fruit over there, and we'll take that and we'll consume it and we'll eat it. Now, it's interesting because later on, Jesus, the Word of God, becomes flesh. He says, you have to eat of my flesh and drink of my blood, right? And essentially, that's how we partake of the tree of eternal life. Anyway, sort of a side note there. But the transhumanist idea is always the idea that humanity needs to do this thing on their own. Add this thing to your humanity and you will become godlike. And what are we doing today? We're trying to add an AI information bot we're trying to Neuralink that into our biology so that we can become more godlike. And that's the ancient deception. It's a human machine chimera. And ancient people always had been experimenting with this historically. Humanity is already like God, made in God's image, although we have fallen into rebellion. The hope is a resurrected humanity, only made possible through Christ. And we see that in the resurrection of Jesus. His human form was glorified, and yet he still was human. He passed through walls. He teleported. He still ate fish. He's still grilling food as one does. And the modern evolutionary model used by the transhumanists to tell people that they don't need God to be transformed. They can do it on their own. They can speed up the next stage of human evolution. Historically, when people attempted to steal this job from God, they created chimeras and not regenerated humanity. So ancient people thought, oh, well, we could add this, horse part or this, and this, whether they actually did this thing, whether they actually had knowledge of genetics and stuff like that to that point is probably not true, but at least the stories are there. The mythology is there of like, this is what we want. We desire this human chimera. But something that did happen from the biblical standpoint is the sons of God saw that the daughters of men could produce offspring for them. And so they made the Nephilim. The transhumanists become like God. It means adding to human genetics. The ancients tried this with animals, even fallen angels. The modern man in rebellion will try it with machines. We are caught between two choices: follow the path of the Nephilim into the antichrist-like humanity, or sort of divine chimera, or allow Christ to lead you to true regeneration and renewed life. And so that was the other part of Joe's dream that caught my attention. It was this idea that I think was slipped in, that these beings are like what humans could be if we were to merge with the machine, if we were to merge with other beings who are more advanced than us or whatever, something like that. Now, I think actually if I was to do like an actual interpretation of the dream, I would think that the beings in Joe Rogan's dream were actually those holding the dragons in bondage in the abyss. So they're actually on our side. So we would call them angels maybe. And maybe they have human-like forms. I don't know. I don't know enough about angelology. I know that the people that do go into the sort of angel studies, there's various forms of angels. Some do look human-like, others not so much. So that kind of goes, yeah, that's maybe not an area of expertise that I should opine on, but that's what I would think. I would think we're more, the interpretation of Joe's dream for me is more Revelation chapter 20. Let's see. He threw this dragon into the abyss and shut it and sealed it over him, that he would not deceive the nations any longer until the 1,000 years were complete. Yeah, so they're sort of caring for the dragon until his time is up. And after these things, he must be released for a short time. So they're sort of jailers. They're the people. They're the beings keeping this water jail secure until the time will come for the dragon to be released. Now, eventually, the dragon does stand on the edge of the shore. He does call out Leviathan. This is actually earlier in Revelation. And the dragon stood at the sand of the seashore, and I saw a beast coming out of the sea having 10 horns and 7 heads, and on the 7th were diadems. And you can. And I actually did I've done several other videos on the Book of Revelation, but yeah. So the dragon sort of calls out these other beasts, which is really, sort of fascinating. They're from the Book of Job, if you want to follow that. The Leviathan and the Behemoth, and then they're conquered. But anyway, there's that. So that's the Joe Rogan dream interpretation session. Maybe there's more. Maybe we'll revisit it. If you want to find this post, you can follow me on X, where I put the clip and I said, let's help Joe Rogan understand his dream. So if you've got an interpretation for Joe Rogan, chime in there over on X, or you can leave a comment here on this video. Well, thank you for checking out this video. As many of you know, I kind of do this part-time, so your support for the channel is really appreciated. I will leave links in the description for videos, for playlists, for live streams that are coming up, and I will catch you in the next one.